All right, now joining me, Nick Viall, host of the Viall Files. What's going on, Nick? I know you're a big Packers fan. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, big Packer fan, big football fan, and always fun to talk about it.
All right, cool. Well, I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your perspective. I know a lot of people know you from reality television, but what I can judge from your Twitter feed, it seems like you're a pretty diehard Packers fan, and I know you're a Wisconsin guy. I mean, is this a lifelong thing? How deep does your Packers fandom go?
It goes pretty deep. I think I became a Packer fan in 1989 when Don Mikowski was the quarterback. I don't know if that rings a bell for anyone who's not a Packer fan. The Magic Man. They were 10-6 that year, missed the playoffs. I think they tied the Minnesota Vikings, if my memory serves me correctly, at 10-6, but the Minnesota Vikings won the tiebreaker. So not only did I become a Packer fan that year, I became a really hater of the Minnesota Vikings. And so ever since then, I've been a pretty diehard Packer fan.
Well, I mean, since you bring up the Vikings, you guys have a pretty tough divisional matchup this weekend. Aaron Rodgers, he's had a toe injury, I guess, since the last couple of months, and he hasn't really been on the field for a full practice in about a month. I mean, as you kind of assess where the Packers are this season, obviously their defense has been playing really well, and with Aaron Rodgers back, I'm not sure how much practice time he actually needs. But, how do you see this game going this weekend?
It's definitely a game I think I'm a little nervous for. Minnesota, they're what, 3-5, something like that, but they've been in every game. They have a talented roster. It's a divisional matchup. They always seem to play the Packers tough, and it's just one of those games where I don't think any Packer fan can go in and assume a victory. It's at Minnesota. It can be loud, and I think Matt LaFleur even mentioned last week the team seemed a bit tired. So week in and week out, it's tough to show up, and up until this point, they've been able to kind of overcome some of the injuries, but you kind of always wonder when is that going to catch up to them. So. I hope they win. I anticipate they will win, but I definitely think it's one of those things. I think if they don't show up, come ready to play, or maybe they start off slow, it could be a game that it's definitely one of those games, I guess you could say, where you feel like you're playing better, but the team hangs around, and all of a sudden it's like the middle of the fourth quarter, and you're just you feel like it's going to end badly. So. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully that's just kind of the anxious fan in me, but I definitely think it's a challenging game for the Packers.
Well, I do think it's one that's not to be overlooked, specifically for what you just mentioned. I mean, the rivalry goes deep, and Aaron Rodgers, has something to prove, I think, after what he's been through the last couple of weeks. Matt LaFleur did mention that, they do need to get back on the practice field to find some offensive chemistry as a unit. But you recently tweeted that you think with the way that the Patriots are playing and Mac Jones's development, that you think it's shaping up to be potentially a Packers New England Super Bowl. Do you still think that's the case?
Yeah, I probably should put hot take on that in terms of listen, it's one of those things. I think Bill Belichick is an excellent coach, arguably the best of all time. And I think, for a Packer fans, this season reminds them a lot of the 2010 season because that team overcame a lot of injuries, and this team as well. And I think for Patriots fans, it has a remnants of Brady's first year as a starter, where they started, I think, 0-2. They started slow. They were around 500 and then got hot at the end. And if the AFC seems really wide open right now. I mean, you got the Bills and the Chiefs have been underperforming, and the Browns seemed hot, but now they're coming back down to earth. And if you're in the AFC and all of a sudden the Patriots get hot and you suspect that Mac Jones will only get more and more comfortable, they're not a team I'd want to face, and I wouldn't want to go against Bill Belichick in the playoffs. So I think it's possible for sure. I don't know if I'd put money on it, but it wouldn't blow my mind. It wouldn't blow my mind.
It's definitely the hot take coming off of last weekend. Everybody talking about Josh McDaniels and Mac Jones and this team coming out of nowhere. But I covered the Patriots for a long time, and I think that some of that fundamental chemistry and stuff that Bill Belichick knows how to develop, it's only a matter of time before they start to break through. When you look at Aaron Rodgers, I mean, every time I have interacted with him or covered him, he's one of those guys that, how do I even describe him? He's nuanced, he's complicated, but his way is the right way all the time. And I think that everything that he's been through the last couple of weeks, it's almost as if this will just kind of add to his intensity, having a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. I mean, for a Packers fan, you seem to have a really working knowledge of the history of the team and some of the more impressive seasons that they've had. Is this the environment that you guys like to be in when, the odds are seemingly stacked against you? You've got some injuries, but you've got a really talented defense, and, you want to prove something.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting how each team, or in the NFL or the Packers, handle adversity, right? Sometimes at adversity, the team seems to crumble and there's a lot of drama. There's certainly been tons of drama for the Packers since the offseason, but for whatever reason, the team seems to really be galvanizing each other around each other. The team seems to be playing kind of like an us versus them mentality, which is great. And from a national perspective, as a Packer fan, I'm biased, right? Like, you're always thinking they're doing well. They're 8-2. They've overcome injuries. They've beaten some really talented teams and quarterbacks. And it's almost like no matter what happens, there's always the Dallas Cowboys don't have to do much, and everyone's like jumping on the Dallas Cowboys bandwagon. But in almost a good way, I think the players are noticing that, and I think they're kind of, they've been 13-3 the past 2 years. They've gone to the conference championship game, and certainly they lost. But for a team that's been that successful, it's almost like they don't seem to still get the respect that they think they deserve. And I think that is motivating this, club as a unit. And I think that could result in really good things down the road.
That's a really interesting point, because Packers fans are diehard. Like, if you're a Green Bay fan, you're a diehard Packers fan. And the setting for Lambeau is so kind of idyllic. Like, when you drive up there, you have to make it a point to get there, obviously, unless you live around the corner. And then you drive through this beautiful neighborhood, and all of a sudden, the sea's clear and like Lambeau appears out of nowhere. And it's a magical place to see a football game, no matter what the temperature is. If you love football, if you love NFL football, like, there's no better place. But to your point, there are more bandwagon Cowboys fans than maybe any other team in the league. And the Packers, for whatever reason, haven't had that level of respect. But like, growing up as a kid from Wisconsin and being a Packer fan, as you put it, what better place is there than Lambeau Field to kind of go as a kid, or like dream as a kid that loves football and actually, was an athlete? Because I know you're a track and field athlete as well.
Yeah, no, it's a magical place. And like you said, if you are a fan of football, college or NFL, you will appreciate watching a game at Lambeau Field. It really is a magical place. The people are super nice. The stadium is historic. It's a really cool venue to watch a game. As they say, there's no bad seat in the stadium. But it's really cool. And I feel very fortunate to be a fan of the team. And I know it, like, especially right now where they're doing that stock sale, and it's like one of those things where all the other fans are like, oh, this is stupid or whatever. But like, it's pretty cool to see. That's the thing. It's like you go to Green Bay, and it's just like it seems so out of place. It's Green Bay is a relatively small city. You have this massive stadium, this NFL, super team. It just it seems truly surreal. And to see, such a small market thrive so well in the NFL it's cool. And I think if you're from Wisconsin or it's just a small town in general, you take a lot of pride in their ability to be successful in this market and in the NFL overall.
Is it weird for you to see Mike McCarthy with Dallas?
It is a little bit, and I think there's some Packer fans that are like strangely anticipating, like, oh geez, like we've lost the NFC Championship game 2 years in a row. Like, imagine having to beat Mike McCarthy either at Lambeau or down in Dallas. Mike McCarthy won us a Super Bowl. I have the pleasure of being friends with his daughter, and I got to meet Mike once, and I am grateful for him as a coach. I think Packer fans have been spoiled, and sometimes we get to be a little ungrateful and maybe remember Mike's last few years. He's an excellent coach. I'm glad that he's successful. I'm rooting for him to be successful. I think it'd be kind of fun to play the Cowboys in the playoffs, and it would be fun to beat Mike McCarthy. But it certainly would make for compelling TV and a good story.
It'd be a great story. Because you're an athlete, track and field, I believe in college as well, right? High school and
yeah, I ran in college as well.
Yeah. I'm curious your take about high-priced receivers, high-value receivers in the league compared to some of those other key positional players on NFL teams. Because the trend lately, for the last couple of years plus has been like, go get those marquee guys, go get those big name receivers. But when you look at teams that have won Super Bowls, what they really have are talented guys between the trenches, and they have some of those stalwart kind of players. As a guy who is an athlete and obviously has an affinity for speed, what is your opinion on the Packers, for example, like going out and targeting those high-priced receivers, whether it be in free agency or the draft, versus some other key positions, maybe even defensively, like you're seeing your defense pay off now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm a big Davante Adams fan, and I know he's a free agent this year. But what the Packers are 5-0 without Davante Adams now, which I don't think the team's better off without him. But I think I agree in the sense that if I'm forced to choose, I mean, obviously you want to have a quarterback. That's number one. And I would rather have a quarterback and a great offensive line and average receivers than a quarterback and average offensive line and great receivers. I think a quarterback can make up for the lack of production at receivers as long as he has time. Like even amazing quarterbacks, if they don't have time to throw and they're constantly scramble, look really pedestrian. And you give a great quarterback time and he can do some damage. And also in the trenches in the defensive line, I think that's extremely important. However, I do think the key to the Packers defense this season has been the plays of the safeties. So I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have the quarterback position and then just be smart with your money around the field. So there's a reason why I'm not a general manager, but I do think we Packer fans and national media make way too big of a deal about, like, there's nothing more annoying stat that you are seeing over and over about, like, the Packers haven't drafted a first-round receiver with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, but they've drafted a lot of high quality second round picks like Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings, and some great third round picks and James Jones and Randall Cobb. Or Randall Cobb was a late second round pick. Either way, but they've certainly invested in the wide receiver position. So that's a bit of a disingenuous stat, but I think the trenches for sure are key to being successful in the NFL.
It's crazy to be reminded that Randall and Jordy Nelson were second-round picks because of how productive they've been. That's wild. We just have another couple minutes here. I don't want to keep you too long. So I do kind of want to transition to what you're doing now. I mentioned the Viall Files. You have a podcast that's really successful. And, even though it sounds like you watch a lot of football and you're a diehard Packers fan, you do also have a pretty rabid following in this reality television world, Bachelor, Bachelorette, all that stuff. So now to be able to kind of Monday morning quarterback, I guess, if you will, which applies in this scenario in our conversation. What's that like for you to kind of be out of that world, but also be connected to it?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, on the Viall Files, we spend a lot of time talking about relationships and dating and social dynamics, and then as well as kind of Monday morning quarterback, the Bachelor when it's on. And yeah, I guess in a way, I use my time as a fan of sports and football and breaking down the Packers, and I kind of do that the same way with reality TV and use my insight, like maybe a former player would, and they're covering sports, and try to offer a perspective of both an insider, a former contestant, player, whatever you want to call it, as well as a fan. And so, the fandom of Bachelor Nation is just as intense as the fandom of NFL football, and they like to break down everything they see. And so it's a lot of fun. There's certainly harder things in the world to have to do. So I'm thankful that I have this show, and certainly, like, it's a great way to interpret it. Ultimately, like, especially The Bachelor, it's a show about relationships, and certainly kind of exaggerated and non-realistic form, but the same kind of feelings and emotions that we experience in real life apply to the emotions they feel in the show. And it's a great way to kind of or be a teaching tool to how we handle our own emotions in crazy and personal situations. So we try to apply that and hopefully kind of have it be fun, but also get some helpful takeaways from it as well.
That's interesting. And it sounds really substantive, actually, especially as it relates to relationships. But, just kind of one more on this topic. You mentioned the rabid fan base, and I'm obviously familiar with that more on the sports side. But when people ask me like, oh, what's it like to cover the NFL and be in NFL locker rooms and all this stuff, everybody kind of wants like an inside peek or a glimpse behind the curtain into how a league like that actually works. So I'm sure you've been asked thousands and thousands of questions about reality TV and all that stuff. But, what is the most surprising thing, whether it relates to, like you're touching on, relationships at the very basic human level or otherwise, like what is the one thing that people really don't know when it comes to these kinds of programs that have such a huge following?
I think it's just kind of the nuance, right? Because I think a lot of people watch it, and a lot of times if you think, well, like how much of it is actually real, fake, scripted, and things like that. And again, that's kind of the perspective I try to provide with my audience, is that, there is a nuance behind it in terms of, certainly it's a staged atmosphere, and so that is very controlled. But like I try to offer, like with my audience, that kind of, what are we seeing that is like controlled, and what are we seeing that is really just an authentic reaction within that controlled environment. And I think a lot of people just have those kind of questions because they will watch things that seem so outrageous. And even sometimes, having been in that world, I'll watch it and be like, what is this person thinking? But it's truly a genuine reaction because I know how things work there, and I know what, again, what's controlled and what's left to kind of play out as a genuine reaction.
Awesome. All right, Nick Viall, thanks for the time. Viall Files, I'm assuming you can find that on all available platforms.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, and if you like to watch it, you can check us out on YouTube as well.
All right, cool. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for your time.